The interview that shook America. The lights in the studio seemed a little brighter than usual. The room was cold, sterile, heavy with an air of anticipation that clung to every surface. Tucker Carlson adjusted his tie with deliberate slowness, casting a sidelong glance at the man sitting opposite him. Donald Trump sat composed, a slight smirk playing at the edges of his lips. His eyes, sharp and glittering with a dangerous kind of calm, scanned the studio lazily as if he owned the very air between them. Tucker leaned forward, tapping the sheaf of papers before him with a practiced hand. "Good evening, America," he said, his voice firm. "Tonight is different. Tonight, history might very well be rewritten before your eyes." He turned to Trump, who smiled wider. "Mr. President, thank you for joining us." "Thank you, Tucker. It's a pleasure to be here. Tremendous honor. And we're going to talk about tonight." Trump paused, his voice dipping into a more somber register. "It's something every American needs to hear." Tucker leaned back, his brow furrowing. "You've suggested you have information, documents, that the public has never seen." "I do," Trump said, nodding. "And tonight, I'm going to share them. Live. Unfiltered. Because the American people deserve the truth. They've been lied to for too long." There was a brief, almost imperceptible ripple of unease across the crew behind the cameras. Tucker pressed on. "Mr. President," he said carefully, "are you concerned about the legality of revealing classified information?" Trump chuckled, low and dry. "Tucker, when the people running the government are criminals, when the very institutions that are supposed to protect us are corrupt to their core, then revealing the truth isn't a crime. It's a duty." Tucker nodded once, solemnly. "Let's begin then," he said. Trump leaned forward and placed a thick manila folder on the table between them. The folder was unmarked except for a heavy red stamp on the front. Top secret. The studio seemed to grow quieter, the silence nearly a physical weight pressing against the walls. "First," Trump said, "let's talk about 2020. Tucker's eyes flashed, but he said nothing. Trump pulled a stack of papers from the folder and spread them out. There were printed emails, official memos, and photographs. The cameras zoomed in cautiously. "These," Trump said, tapping the papers with a thick finger, "are communications between senior intelligence officials and media executives. Before the election, they coordinated the suppression of certain stories. Stories that would have destroyed Joe Biden's campaign." Tucker leaned forward, squinting. "Are you saying the intelligence agencies worked with the media to sway the election?" "I'm not saying it, Tucker," Trump said. "I'm showing it." He held up a memo. The header was unmistakable. Office of the Director of National Intelligence. The memo detailed suggested media narratives to maintain electoral integrity by discrediting reports involving Hunter Biden, foreign dealings, and potential security risks tied to the Biden family. Tucker read silently for a moment, then looked up, stunned. This looks like collusion," he whispered. "It is collusion," Trump said grimly, "between the intelligence community, the mainstream media, and political operatives inside the Democrat Party." There was a long, chilling pause. "But that's just the appetizer," Trump said, almost jovially. Tucker swallowed hard. "What else do you have?" Trump reached into the folder again and pulled out a second batch of documents. "This," he said, "is about surveillance." He laid out surveillance orders. Not against terrorists, not against foreign operatives, but against American citizens. Journalists, politicians, business leaders, and not just general surveillance. Targeted, invasive, unauthorized surveillance. Tucker's face darkened as he read the names. "These people," Tucker said slowly, "were being monitored without warrants, without cause," Trump confirmed. "Because they were political threats. Because they asked the wrong questions. There were emails from NSA officials discussing problematic voices and how best to neutralize narratives detrimental to national stability." "Neutralize," Trump repeated, shaking his head. "That's their word. Neutralize American citizens who disagree with them." Tucker looked genuinely shaken. The viewers at home, millions of them, leaned closer to their screens. "But it gets worse," Trump said. He pulled out a third, thinner folder. This one was bound with a black clip. He flipped it open and slid a photograph across the table. Tucker looked down and recoiled slightly. It was a grainy image, a warehouse, dimly lit, rows upon rows of stacked crates. "What is this?" Tucker asked. Trump smiled grimly. "That," he said, "is evidence of secret weapon stockpiles. On American soil, controlled not by the military, not by any known branch of law enforcement, but by private contractors. Contractors funded through back channels by federal agencies." Tucker looked horrified. "Why?" he asked. "To be used," Trump said slowly, "in case of widespread civil unrest. Not to protect the people, but to control them." He produced a second image, schematics of crowd control technology, non-lethal but deeply invasive, sonic weapons, mobile prisons, remote surveillance drones. They were preparing for a scenario where they'd need to lock down American cities, Trump said, not because of foreign threats, but because they feared losing control over the American people. Tucker sat back heavily in his chair. "You're saying," he said hoarsely, "that elements of our own government were preparing for war against American citizens?" "Not preparing," Trump said. "Prepared. Right now, there are units standing by with no public oversight, no congressional authorization, ready to be deployed." The air in the studio was electric. The producer off camera gestured frantically, but Tucker ignored him. "And this next part," Trump said, his voice turning cold, "is the worst of all." He pulled out the final set of documents. Not papers this time, but a slim black laptop. He opened it, logged in, and turned the screen toward Tucker. There, displayed on the screen, were financial records. Enormous transactions. Massive sums of money moving between shell corporations, offshore accounts, and domestic charitable foundations. "This," Trump said, "is the real reason they fear me." The transactions linked sitting members of Congress, senior intelligence officials, even former presidents, all profiting from international deals that compromise national security. Ukraine, China, Iran, even Russia, Trump said, his voice steady. "They've sold out the country, piece by piece." Tucker stared at the screen, mute. "And they knew," Trump continued, "that if I stayed in office, I would expose them all." The screen behind Tucker suddenly went black. The studio feed had been cut off temporarily by the network executives scrambling to regain control. But Tucker didn't care. He looked directly into the main camera, speaking over the growing commotion behind the scenes. "America," he said, his voice trembling with emotion, "you deserve to see this." Trump leaned forward, staring into the lens, as if he could reach through the screen into every living room in America. "This isn't about politics," he said. "It's about survival. Our country, your country, has been hijacked." Tucker turned back to Trump. "What happens next?" he asked. Trump smiled faintly. "That's up to the American people," he said. The studio was dead silent except for the soft hum of the lights overhead. For the first time in his long career, Tucker Carlson found himself almost without words. He shuffled the papers Trump had revealed, his hands slightly trembling. Every sheet was a landmine. Every file, a demolition charge wired straight into the foundations of the American establishment. He looked back at Trump, who sat serenely, as if they were merely discussing weekend plans. "You understand," Tucker said quietly, "that after tonight, they'll come after you harder than ever before." Trump smiled wider, the smile of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. "They already have," he said. "They've spent years trying to destroy me. Fake investigations, media smears, endless witch hunts. I survived it all. And now they have to deal with the truth coming out." Tucker leaned back, exhaling slowly. "But the documents you revealed tonight," he said, glancing down at the pile on the table, "they show crimes. Crimes at the highest levels of government." "Yes," Trump said simply. "And you're implicating presidents, congressmen, intelligence directors." "Every one," Trump said. "No one is clean, Tucker. Not in that town." The producer was waving his arms off stage, signaling frantically, but Tucker ignored him. "This is too important," Tucker said under his breath. Trump leaned in. "And I have more," he said, almost whispering. "This is just the beginning." Tucker's mouth opened slightly, stunned. "More?" Trump nodded. "There's a vault," he said. "A physical vault. Copies of everything. Insurance, you could say. located outside of Washington, guarded by people who aren't on anyone's payroll. Tucker's heartbeat thundered in his ears. And if something happens to you, then the vault is opened, Trump said simply. And everything gets released. All of it. He tapped the table for emphasis. Emails, audio recordings, video evidence, names, dates, account numbers. Proof beyond any shadow of a doubt. Tucker realized, with a chilling sense of clarity, that this was bigger than anything he had ever encountered. Bigger than Watergate, bigger than any leak, any scandal in American history. This wasn't just a breach. It was a collapse. The dam had cracked, and the water was about to roar through. Trump adjusted his cufflinks casually, as if he hadn't just upended the entire country with a few folders and a laptop. Tucker found his voice. "Mr. President," he said, "what do you want the American people to do with this information?" Trump didn't hesitate. "Demand accountability," he said. "Demand justice. Take back your country. Don't let these criminals hide behind flags and anthems they don't believe in. They betrayed everything America stands for." He paused, then leaned closer. "And if they fight back, if they try to silence you, don't back down. Don't ever back down." The words hung in the air, crackling with electricity. Outside the studio, protests were already forming. News had leaked, bits and pieces flashing across social media faster than fire across dry grass. Hashtag Trump Files trended worldwide within minutes. Major networks cut into their scheduled programming with urgent news alerts. White House officials issued panic statements, denouncing the interview as irresponsible and dangerous. But it was too late. The truth was out, and it was spreading. Tucker turned to the camera, his face pale but determined. "Tonight, you heard it for yourself," he said. "Documents, proof, crimes exposed at the highest levels of our government. We owe it to ourselves and to the generations that will follow to demand answers." He paused, his voice cracking slightly with emotion. "This is not a partisan issue. This is an American issue." Trump stood slowly, gathering the remaining documents and slipping them back into the battered folder. As he rose, he looked once more into the camera. "God bless America," he said simply. And then he was gone. The screen slowly faded to black. In the darkness that followed, millions of Americans sat in stunned silence, the weight of what they had just witnessed settling heavily over the nation like an iron curtain. In the weeks that followed, the country erupted. Protests, investigations, resignations, lawsuits flew like arrows. Subpoenas flooded the halls of power. Congressional hearings devolved into chaos as stunned politicians struggled to contain the fallout. The deep state's labyrinth of lies was exposed, inch by painful inch, under the relentless scrutiny of a public that had finally awakened. Trump himself became a symbol, hated by some, revered by others, but impossible to ignore. His enemies called him a traitor. His supporters called him a savior. History would judge him, as it judges all men who dare to pull back the curtain. But one thing was certain. The night Trump sat across from Tucker Carlson and laid bare the hidden machinery of power, America changed forever, and nothing, ever again, would be the same. As Donald Trump disappeared behind the heavy studio curtains, a chilling silence remained. Tucker Carlson sat motionless under the blinding lights, the folder of exposed classified documents still resting on the table before him, glowing like radioactive waste. The feed went to black for a moment. America collectively held its breath. Then, unexpectedly, the broadcast returned. Tucker, pale and stunned, stared directly into the camera. We're going to continue," he said quietly. "We owe it to you." The producers behind the glass scrambled in chaos. Executives barked down the phone lines, demanding the feed be cut permanently, but they were too late. The dam Trump had cracked was breaking faster than anyone could stop, and what came next would shake the nation even harder. Tucker turned to the folder Trump had left behind. Something else was tucked beneath the documents, a slim silver USB drive. Attached was a handwritten note in Trump's unmistakable scrawl. "Play the video." Tucker hesitated for just a second, and then obeyed. He slotted the drive into his laptop. A video file popped up. No title, no description, Just one clip. Tucker clicked it. The screen flickered and came to life. It was footage from inside the White House, but not during Trump's administration. The date stamp was 2016, November 9th, the day after Trump's election victory. There in the Oval Office stood Barack Obama. Alongside him, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, John Brennan, James Clapper, and Chief Justice John Roberts. Their faces were grim, tense. The hidden camera caught every word. Obama. Trump cannot be allowed to undo everything we built. He cannot be allowed to operate independently. Brennan. We'll engage contingency plans, media operations, legal containment. Clinton. International pressure. Delegitimize him before he's even sworn in. Biden. If necessary, we escalate. Roberts. I can control certain rulings if needed. Tucker's mouth fell open. The video continued. Shocking coordination at the highest levels to kneecap an incoming president before he had even taken office. Tucker could barely breathe. His voice shook as he addressed the audience. You just heard it yourselves? A conspiracy at the highest levels of government, before Donald Trump was even sworn in. He turned to the camera, his face pale. And it gets worse. The second folder Trump had left contained more names. Even George W. Bush, it turned out, had his fingerprints on secret deals with China through proxy businesses. Bill Clinton had set up black ops funds siphoned through charitable organizations. Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell had jointly invested in security companies preparing for civil contingency management. It wasn't just Democrats. It was both parties. A uniparty, pretending to oppose each other in public, while privately looting the republic. Outside the studio, the first sounds of unrest began. A low rumble of shouting. Police sirens in the distance. The story had already exploded across every social platform in existence. Millions watched in real time, phones buzzing with alerts. The White House issued a frantic emergency broadcast. The footage released tonight is doctored. Dangerous disinformation. We urge Americans to remain calm and disregard these false narratives. But nobody was listening. Nobody believed them anymore. Tucker pressed on. He opened the final folder. It contained names, dozens of them, tied directly to foreign intelligence services. Sitting Congress members on the take from China's Ministry of State Security. Judges bribed by cartel money. Military generals promising allegiance to global management alliances beyond U.S. borders. Suddenly, a producer rushed onto the set, whispering furiously into Tucker's ear. They're trying to breach the building, he hissed. Federal agents. Tucker stared at him, stunned. What? They're outside, armed. Tucker looked directly into the camera again. They're coming for us, he said. Right now. Because of what you've just seen. In that moment, his decision crystallized. He turned and grabbed the laptop containing Trump's evidence, clutching it to his chest. If they shut us down, remember what you saw, he said. Remember everything. Then the feed went dark. The next morning, America was on fire. In cities across the country, protests erupted. Not along old party lines, but citizen against government itself. Enormous crowds filled streets in Washington, D.C., chanting, "Release the full files. We want the truth. Accountability now." Federal buildings were surrounded by furious Americans waving homemade banners. In some places, military units deployed, but many soldiers refused orders to suppress protesters. Several governors declared states of emergency. Meanwhile, the White House was in total lockdown. Leaked reports said President Biden had collapsed during a private briefing and was being treated for anxiety-related issues. Behind closed doors, terrified officials tried to craft a response. The next night, a battered but unbroken Tucker Carlson appeared again, broadcasting from an undisclosed location. He spoke directly to the American people. We have more. Trump left us more. Tonight, I'm going to show you part of what's still hidden. He held up a second USB drive. This, he said, connects sitting members of Congress, former presidents, tech billionaires, and international intelligence agencies. All part of an operation to transform America from a sovereign republic into a managed democracy. He paused, and it names names. In the files Tucker released that night, Barack Obama was tied to international tech deals, exchanging U.S. citizen data to Chinese firms. George W. Bush and Dick Cheney had authorized secret foreign military actions without congressional oversight, including on U.S. soil. Nancy Pelosi had coordinated with Silicon Valley to censor political opponents. John Brennan had personally approved disinformation campaigns against elected officials deemed problematic. It was an unmasking like nothing in American history. Within days, the Supreme Court announced an emergency session. Mass resignations rocked both parties. International leaders distanced themselves from Washington. Several CIA and NSA senior officials simply vanished, going off-grid. And Donald Trump? He reappeared, triumphant, at a massive rally in Texas. Before a sea of roaring patriots, he spoke simply. They thought they could silence you. They thought they could silence me. But the truth is a lion, and now it's loose. The crowd thundered its approval. Behind him, enormous screens displayed the words, "We the people know." The camera zoomed out slowly, capturing the mass of humanity assembled beneath the burning Texan sun. Tens of thousands of Americans from every background imaginable stood shoulder to shoulder, chanting one word that shook the earth itself. Freedom, freedom, freedom. Trump raised a hand, and slowly the crowd quieted. "There's one more thing," he said, his voice booming over the speakers. "Something I didn't tell even Tucker." The arena hushed in anticipation. Trump reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, black device, no bigger than a matchbox. "This," he said, holding it aloft, "is the kill switch." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "A backup system installed during my administration," Trump continued. "Hidden, protected. If the Republic ever fell into the hands of traitors, if the Constitution was ever betrayed beyond repair, this device could trigger the release of every classified document, every sealed file, every dirty secret, directly to you, the American people." Gasps echoed across the field. "Every crime," Trump said, "every betrayal, every lie, from JFK to 9/11 to COVID to election rigging. Everything." He smiled grimly. "And they know I have it." Tucker Carlson, watching live from a secret studio, whispered under his breath, "My God." Trump stared directly into the camera drone circling above him. "So here's my message to the swamp rats watching from their bunkers," he said. "You have 24 hours to surrender. Resign. Confess. Stand trial. Or I press this button." He paused dramatically. "And you lose everything." The crowd exploded into deafening cheers. The broadcast reached every television, every phone, every laptop in America and beyond. International news agencies carried it live. Foreign leaders in London, Paris, Berlin, Tokyo, Beijing watched with bated breath. Some cheered, some panicked. The world order was teetering. Inside Washington, D.C., emergency meetings convened underground. Cabinet members screamed at each other across secured conference tables. General Mark Milley slammed his hand down on a table, shouting, "If he pushes that button, it's over. There'll be no salvaging anything." CIA Director William Burns muttered, "There's nothing we can do. The people know now. If we make a move against him, we just prove everything he said." Chief Justice John Roberts, caught between shame and fury, slumped in his chair, silent. The president's inner circle, once smug and untouchable, now realized their empire was crumbling beneath them. Meanwhile, across the country, entire police departments resigned in protest against federal overreach. Military bases lowered flags to half-mast, not in mourning for America, but for what the government had become. Churches, town halls, community centers opened their doors to citizens seeking truth, unity, and action. The old divisions, race, class, political party, began dissolving overnight. A new axis had formed. The people versus the machine. 24 hours later, Trump stood again before America, the device still in his hand. He faced the camera one final time. "I gave him a chance," he said. "You saw it." He pressed his thumb gently onto the button, but paused. "This isn't about vengeance," he said. "It's about rebirth." He set the device on the podium. The American people will decide what happens next, he said. Not me. Not them. You. The crowd wept, cheered, fell to their knees. Not in worship, but in gratitude. Tucker Carlson appeared via satellite, his voice thick with emotion. Tonight, America was given back to its rightful owners. And with that, Trump left the stage, walking into the crowd. No Secret Service phalanx, no armored car waiting. Just a man, walking among free men and women. The screen faded to black. 3 words appeared in white letters. We are free.